All right, so what we're going to go through today is functions. And what a function is I like to describe it as basically it's a library of index cards that you have created, and those index cards have two things on them. They have a name, and they also have a set of code that you can go. So think of it like this. It's almost like a variable, but instead of a variable only holding an integer or a number, it's able to hold a bunch of code itself. Okay, so that's basically what a variable, a function is. And the way it works is essentially, it's interesting that VEX VR works like this, because when you see this main here, right, and you see the DEF, DEF means you are defining, and essentially what we're using when we use like def main, you're using what VR calls the main function of the actual program. Like, this is the main function that actually runs your robot, right? So what we're essentially going to do is we're going to create functions, and we're going to use them inside of our main container, right? And it's really helpful if if you're doing something that is repetitive, right? You're doing things, or you're going to do, like for instance, turning on an LED for 3 seconds. Maybe you turn on an LED for 3 seconds many times in your program. It would be really helpful to essentially just make a function that turns on an LED, and every time you want to turn on that LED for 3 seconds, you basically just tell it, turn on LED for 3 seconds, and it goes, looks at that set of code, it does it, and then it comes back and it continues, which is kind of nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple functions here. We're going to create a couple functions with just drawing shapes, because that's the easiest way that we can demo what it is. So what we're going to do is up top here, above main, you can either put it above main or you can put it below main. It really doesn't matter, just as long as it's there. And I'm going to call the first one, I'm going to call it square. And we're going to do open, close, and then a colon. And we're going to come in here, we're going to make sure we're tabbed in, because we want it to be inside that container of square. And let's make a program that makes the robot draw a square. And let's just say it's a 200 by 200 square. So we have drawn many squares so far. We like to use for loops for squares. So we're going to do for. I'm going to put the word square in range 4 times, colon. And then inside that for loop, a square is essentially just driving forward and turning right. Driving forward, turning right, driving forward, turning right. So we're going to do drivetrain.drive forward. Say 200 millimeters, and we're going to do drivetrain dot turn for right 90 degrees. So we have just created a function that goes in a square, right? I would like it to also draw the square, so before my for loop, I'm going to put it so that it drops the pen. So pen.move down, and then after it draws the square, I'm going to have it pull up the pen. Up, because I don't want it to draw squares. I don't want it to draw a line everywhere. So this basically just draws a square, and it picks the pen up. So here's a nice thing. Inside this main, if I just literally type in the word square, open, close, parenthesis, it should see this. It will come up to this function called square, and it will do it. So if I go like this, and I run it, it should draw a 200 by 200 square. Now, obviously, me using one square is not really helpful for a function. But let's just say then I don't know, I just drive, and I move my robot, let's just say 300. And then I want to draw another square. So I'm just moving the robot, and I'm going to draw another square. So it should draw square. All right, so essentially we got two squares, right? And again, if I wanted to do that again, I could maybe this time I drivetrain turn 4, and I go right 90 degrees, and then maybe I drive a little bit somewhere else, maybe 300, and I'm just kind of thinking in my brain, and then I draw another square. Here's the point. Every time I want to draw a square, I don't need to copy and paste that code. I can literally just type square, and it will draw a square. So let's see what happens here. And obviously we can use that square multiple different times anywhere else. But what if we also wanted to maybe draw a triangle, right? Maybe we wanted to make a triangle. So let's create another function called triangle. And we're going to make a triangle. So I'm going to do an equilateral triangle just because it's easy in the math. And basically, so again, we want to drop the pen because we want the pen to actually be down when we're using it. And a triangle is essentially, it's going to sound weird to say this, but it's essentially a square, but it's only got 3 sides, right? It's got 3 sides, and an equilateral turns 60 degrees each time, and all the sides are the same. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do another for loop, and I'm going to say triangle in range 3, and I'm going to say drivetrain dot drive 4 forward. I'm going to say 200 millimeters, and instead of doing a 90-degree turn, I'm going to do a 60-degree turn because equilaterals have 60 degrees. 60 times 3 is 180 degrees. There's 180 degrees in a triangle. Now when I come in here, I'm going to pull the pen up. So pen dot move up. So now I have a function called square, and I have a function called triangle. If I put triangle right at the beginning here, right, all I did was put triangle. I called my function called triangle, and you'll see we should draw a triangle right at the beginning. Oh, obviously not working, right? So let's see where we messed up. Where did we mess up? So where we messed up is this should actually be 120 degrees because we're doing the exterior angle. I wasn't thinking you're drawing the exterior angle of that 60 degrees. So we're actually turning 120 degrees because we're drawing the obtuse angle, the exterior angle of that triangle. So if I do 120, you'll notice I get an equilateral triangle, and then it's going to draw just the square right over top of that, all right? But the point is, right, if I could leave the triangle there, I could also put maybe a triangle here, maybe I put a triangle here instead, draw a square, right? So you can do all kinds of stuff here. You can play with it, but the point is, I only have to type a couple lines or one line in order to call a group of code, right? Which is really helpful, really, really helpful. You're going to do things like mazes coming up, right? And a maze is basically just a bunch of going straights and turnings and turning lefts, turning rights. It would be really helpful if you just made a function for going straight or going backwards or turning right, right? So you could just basically work through what you need to do, right? Or if you're doing like crossing out numbers is one of the activities that we have. Basically crossing out the group of numbers 1 to 100 individually, right? So you can make a function for actually crossing out the number. You can make a function for transitioning from one number to another. You can make a function from going from one line to another. So there's a lot of use cases for function.